The thing you are holding on to right now, the thing you grip so tightly because you believe it's keeping you safe, is the exact thing that is drowning you. That's the paradox nobody tells you about. We are taught that control equals safety. Hold the rope tighter and you won't fall. Plan every detail and nothing will go wrong. Carry the weight yourself and no one can drop it. But somewhere along the way, you stopped living and started managing. You stopped breathing and started bracing. And the strange truth is this: the moment you finally open your hand and let the thing fall, you don't crash, you float. This is not a video about giving up. It is not about laziness or pretending your problems don't exist. It's about something far more difficult and far more freeing: learning to set down what was never yours to carry in the first place. Today we're going to walk through an old way of seeing life, one that Zen monks and quiet forest teachers understood long before the world got loud. We're going to talk about what it really means to let go, why your body and mind are exhausted from carrying invisible weight, and how release, real release, feels less like losing and more like coming home. Most people spend their whole life gripping something, a relationship that ended years ago but still lives in their chest, a version of themselves they think they should be, a fear about tomorrow that hasn't even happened yet. You carry these things around like stones in a backpack, and you've carried them for so long, you've forgotten they're even there. You just think this is what heavy feels like. You think this is normal, but it isn't. It's just familiar, and there's a difference between the two that most people never learn until it's almost too late. The weight you didn't know you were carrying. Picture someone walking for miles with a backpack full of stones. At first they picked up each stone for a reason. This one for protection, that one for control, another one just in case. Each stone made sense on its own, but stone by stone, year by year, the weight became part of them. Their shoulders curved forward, their breathing got shorter. They stopped noticing the weight because it had become the shape of who they were. This is what happens with grudges, old fears, the need to be right, the need to be seen, the fear of what people think. None of these things arrived all at once. They arrived quietly, one at a time, and you agreed to carry each one without ever really deciding to. The tragedy isn't that you're carrying stones. The tragedy is that you've forgotten your hands were made to hold things loosely, not to clench forever. Think about the first stone you ever picked up. Maybe it was small. A comment someone made about you when you were young. Something that felt unfair. Something that made you decide right then and there, I need to protect myself from this happening again. That decision felt smart at the time. It felt like wisdom. So you picked up the stone and put it in the bag, and you told yourself, this one keeps me safe. Then came the second stone, a friendship that ended badly, a promise that was broken, and instead of feeling the pain and setting it down, you turned it into another rule for yourself, another reason to be careful, another weight to carry, so it would never happen again. One stone became two, two became five, five became so many you stopped counting, because counting them would mean admitting how heavy the bag had become. Here is the part nobody warns you about. The stones don't just sit quietly in the bag waiting. They shape the way you walk. They shape the way you stand. A person who has carried too much weight for too long starts to lean forward, bracing for more weight before it even arrives. They flinch before they're hit. They apologize before they've done anything wrong. They prepare for disappointment before anyone has disappointed them. This is not weakness. This is what a body does when it has learned, again and again, that weight is coming and there is no way to avoid it. And the strange thing is, most people don't even remember picking up half of what they're carrying. Ask someone why they find it so hard to trust, and they might not even connect it to the stone they picked up 15 years ago. Ask someone why they can't relax, even when everything is fine, and they might not realize they are still bracing for a storm that passed a long time ago. The weight becomes invisible not because it disappears, but because it becomes normal. You stop noticing the ache in your shoulders because you've never known what it felt like to walk without it. There's a kind of quiet grief in this. Somewhere inside you is a version of yourself that once knew how to set things down. A child doesn't carry grudges the way adults do. A child gets upset, cries, and 5 minutes later is laughing again. The anger gone completely, nothing left behind. That ability to release didn't vanish. It got buried under years of being told that letting go means you didn't care enough, that moving on means you're forgetting, that forgiveness means the other person wins. So you kept picking up stones instead, because somewhere along the way, holding on started to feel like the responsible thing to do. But look closer at what the weight is actually doing to you. It's not protecting you from anything. The stone from that old betrayal doesn't stop new people from hurting you. It just makes you exhausted before they even get the chance. The stone from that old failure doesn't stop you from failing again. It just makes you too afraid to try in the first place. The stones were never armor. They were just weight, dressed up to look like protection, so you wouldn't notice how tired you'd become. This is the strange trick of the mind. It convinces you that the backpack is who you are, that without the stones, you'd be someone unrecognizable, someone soft, someone who could get hurt easily. But that's backwards. The real you was never the weight. The real you is the one still walking underneath it all, still breathing, still capable of setting each stone down the moment you finally decide the weight was never required in the first place. Notice something else. The bag doesn't ask you if you want to keep carrying it. It just sits there, day after day, and you either keep adding to it, or you start to ask yourself a harder question. Do I actually need this stone anymore, or have I just been carrying it out of habit? That single question, asked honestly, is where everything starts to shift. Not because the stone magically disappears the moment you ask, but because for the first time, you see it clearly. You see that it was a choice all along, even if it didn't feel like one. Most people go their whole lives never asking that question. They just keep walking, shoulders curved, breath shallow, believing that this is simply what life feels like. Heavy, tiring, a little harder every year. They mistake the weight for maturity. They mistake the exhaustion for wisdom. And by the time they're old, they've forgotten there was ever another way to walk. Watch how this plays out in ordinary moments, the small ones nobody thinks to examine. Someone gives you a compliment, and instead of simply receiving it, you deflect it, because somewhere in your bag is a stone that says you don't deserve praise without earning it twice over. Someone offers you help, and instead of accepting it, you insist you're fine. Because somewhere in your bag is a stone that says needing help makes you weak. Someone loves you well, without conditions, and instead of relaxing into it, part of you waits for the moment it will be taken away, because somewhere in your bag is a stone that says good things don't last. None of these reactions are random. They are the weight speaking through you, shaping your responses before you even have a chance to choose them. This is why some people can be given every reason to feel safe and still feel unsafe. It's not that the present moment is dangerous. It's that the backpack is still full of old danger, and the body doesn't always know the difference between then and now. It just knows weight, and weight puts it on alert. This is not something to be ashamed of. It's simply what happens to anyone who has lived long enough to collect a few stones of their own. The shame only comes from believing you're the only one carrying something, when in truth, everyone around you is walking with a bag of their own, most of them just as unaware of it as you were before this very moment. Consider, too, how the weight gets passed down without anyone meaning to pass it. A parent who was never allowed to cry raises a child who learns not to cry either, and calls it strength. A person who was taught that anger is dangerous grows into someone who swallows their anger until it turns into something quieter and more corrosive. Resentment, exhaustion, a low hum of bitterness they can't quite explain. The stones don't always start with you. Sometimes they were handed to you by people who were only trying to protect you the best way they knew how, using the only tools they had. This doesn't mean you have to keep carrying what they gave you. It just means the weight isn't always your fault, even when the choice to finally set it down is yours alone to make. But you don't have to wait that long to change any of this. You can stop right now, mid-step, and simply notice what you're carrying. Not to fix it all at once, not to throw the whole bag away in one dramatic moment, because that kind of sudden release rarely lasts. It's usually just another form of running, dressed up to look like healing. Real change starts smaller than that. It starts with just noticing, just feeling the weight for what it actually is, instead of what you've convinced yourself it needs to be. Try this the next time you feel that familiar heaviness settle into your chest or your shoulders. Instead of pushing through it the way you always have, pause. Ask yourself, quietly, without judgment, what am I actually carrying right now? Is it something happening today, or is it an old stone that got triggered by something that only reminded me of the past? You'll be surprised how often the answer is the second one. You'll be surprised how much of your daily heaviness has almost nothing to do with today, and almost everything to do with a version of you that picked up a stone years ago and never got the chance to set it back down. That noticing alone is the first crack of light. It's the moment the shoulders remember they were built to lift, not just to hold. It's the beginning of understanding that the backpack was never you. It was only ever something you were carrying. And anything you're carrying, you're also allowed to set down. One stone, one breath, one honest moment at a time. Why letting go feels like losing? Here's where it gets hard. Your mind has convinced you that holding on equals love, equals responsibility, equals strength. So when someone tells you to let go, it feels like betrayal. Let go of the grudge, but they hurt me. Let go of the plan, but then how will I survive? Let go of who I thought I'd become by now, but that would mean admitting I was wrong. This is the trick your mind plays. It confuses holding on with meaning something. But watch closely. A river doesn't hold onto the water that passes through it. It doesn't grip each drop and beg it to stay. The river lets the water move, and because it lets go, it never runs dry. If it tried to hold every drop, it would stop being a river. It would become a swamp, stagnant, still, slowly rotting from the inside. You were built like the river, not like the swamp. But somewhere along the way, you learned to hold on out of fear, and fear has convinced you that letting go means disappearing. Think about why this fear runs so deep. From the time you were small, you were taught, in small and large ways, that holding on is what good people do. Hold on to your promises. Hold on to your family, even when it hurts. Hold on to your beliefs, even when they no longer fit who you've become. Hold on to the plan. Hold on to the relationship. Hold on to the job. Hold on to the anger, because letting any of it go feels like admitting defeat. Nobody ever sat you down and taught you that some things are meant to be held for a while and then released, the same way you hold a breath and then let it out, not because the air was bad, but because that is simply how breathing works. So when you finally consider letting something go, a grudge you've carried for years, a version of the future you had planned, a belief about yourself that no longer serves you, your mind panics. It doesn't experience this as relief. It experiences it as loss, because your mind has built an entire identity around the thing you're holding. If you let go of the grudge, who are you without the story of being wronged? If you let go of the plan, who are you without the certainty of knowing what comes next? If you let go of the old version of yourself you thought you'd become by now, who are you without the disappointment, that has quietly been fueling you for years. This is why letting go feels so much like losing, even when it's actually the opposite. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the weight you mistook for yourself. But in the moment, those two things feel identical, and that confusion is exactly why so many people choose to keep carrying pain instead of releasing it. It's not that they enjoy the pain, it's that the pain has become familiar, and familiar feels safer than unknown, even when familiar is slowly wearing them down. Look again at the river. The river does not sit and mourn every drop of water that leaves it. It doesn't chase the water downstream, begging it to come back. It simply allows the movement, because movement is what keeps it alive. A river that tried to hold on to every drop would stop flowing. It would spread out, lose its shape, grow shallow and warm and still. Eventually, it would stop being water that gives life and start being water that breeds sickness. This is not a punishment for holding on. It's just what happens naturally when something that was built to move is forced to stay still. You are the same. When you hold on to a grudge for years, you don't become stronger from it. You become stagnant. The energy that could have gone towards something new gets trapped, circling the same old wound, again and again, keeping it fresh in your mind long after the actual event has ended. The person who hurt you may not even remember what they did, but you remember every detail, because you've replayed it 1,000 times, thinking that reliving it somehow protects you from it happening again. It doesn't. It just keeps the wound open, year after year, while you tell yourself you're being careful. The same is true for the plans you refuse to release. You build an image in your mind of exactly how your life is supposed to look. This job, this relationship, this age when certain things should happen. And when life takes a different path, instead of adjusting, you grip the old plan tighter. You mourn the version of life that didn't happen, instead of noticing the version that actually did. And so you walk through your real life half present, still holding on to the ghost of a plan that was never guaranteed to begin with. This is not a flaw in you. It's simply what happens when no one ever taught you that release is not betrayal. Nobody explained that setting something down doesn't erase that it mattered. Letting go of the grudge doesn't mean what happened to you was okay. Letting go of the plan doesn't mean your dreams didn't matter. Letting go of who you thought you'd be by now doesn't mean you failed. It simply means you finally trust yourself enough to stop needing the old weight to prove something that was never in question in the first place. There's a quiet moment that happens right before someone finally lets something go, and it's worth naming, because so few people recognize it while it's happening. It feels like standing at the edge of something, hand still closed around the thing you've carried for so long, and some part of you whispers, "But if I open my hand, will I even remember how to walk without this?" This is the exact moment fear disguises itself as caution. It tells you that letting go is reckless, that holding on is responsible, that the moment you release the grudge or the plan or the old identity, everything will fall apart. But nothing falls apart. What actually happens is quieter and far less dramatic than the fear predicted. You simply feel lighter. You simply breathe a little easier. The catastrophe your mind promised never arrives because it was never real to begin with. It was just the fear trying to justify why you should keep holding on a little longer. Think about how this shows up in relationships. Someone stays in a situation long after it has stopped being good for them, not because they still believe in it, but because leaving would mean admitting the years already spent were, in some way, wasted. So instead of releasing what has already ended, in every way except on paper, they hold on tighter, pouring more time into something that has already left, simply to avoid feeling the loss of what they poured in before. This is not love. This is the fear of loss disguising itself as loyalty. Real loyalty doesn't require you to abandon yourself to prove it. And real love, The kind worth holding on to doesn't require you to grip it so tightly that you both suffocate. The same pattern shows up with old versions of yourself. Maybe there was a time you were sure you'd have a certain career, a certain family, a certain life by a certain age. And when life didn't unfold that way, instead of grieving that specific picture and making room for the one actually in front of you, you kept the old picture alive in your mind, comparing your real life against it every single day, always coming up short. This comparison is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. You're not just living your life, you're living your life while simultaneously mourning a life that never existed, and grief for something imaginary is somehow just as heavy as grief for something real. Letting go of that old picture doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. It means finally allowing your dreams to update, the same way a river updates its path when it meets a rock, moving around it instead of hurling itself against it over and over, wearing itself down for nothing. The river doesn't experience this as failure. It doesn't call it giving up. It simply flows the way that actually works, and somehow it still reaches the ocean, just by a different path than the one it might have imagined at its source. This is what letting go actually offers you, underneath all the fear. Not loss, but movement. Not disappearance, but redirection. The energy you've spent for years holding the grudge, defending the old plan, mourning the version of yourself you thought you'd become, that energy doesn't vanish when you release what you're holding. It becomes available again. It becomes yours to use for something that's actually happening now, instead of something that ended long ago or never happened at all. That is the quiet gift hiding on the other side of the fear. Not less life, but more of it, finally freed up to be lived, instead of spent guarding what was never yours to protect in the first place. The difference between releasing and abandoning. Letting go is not throwing something away in anger. It's not pretending you don't care. Real release is quieter than that. It's opening your hand, not because you don't value what's inside it, but because you finally understand that closing your fist tighter was never protecting it. It was crushing it. Think about sand. Try to grab a fistful and squeeze as hard as you can, and it slips right through your fingers faster. But hold your hand open, palm flat, relaxed, and the sand simply rests there. This is the strange law of letting go. The tighter you grip, the faster things leave you. The more you release, the more things are able to stay, if they were ever meant to stay at all. This is what the old forest teachers meant when they spoke of non-attachment. It was never about not caring. It was about caring so deeply that you refused to suffocate the thing you loved with your fear of losing it. There's an important difference here that most people miss, and it's worth slowing down for. Abandoning something is cold. It's turning your back, pretending it never mattered, numbing yourself so the pain can't reach you anymore. People do this all the time and call it letting go, when really, it's just another form of running. You see it when someone gets hurt in a relationship and swears off love completely, not because they've healed, but because they've decided caring is too dangerous. That's not release. That's a wall built out of fear. And walls, no matter how strong they look, are still just another kind of weight to carry. Releasing is different. Releasing keeps the heart open while the hand relaxes. It says, I loved this. I valued this. This mattered to me, and I can still let it go without needing to pretend it didn't matter at all. This is much harder than abandoning something because it requires you to feel the full weight of what you're releasing instead of numbing yourself to avoid the pain. But it's also the only kind of letting go that actually heals you, because abandoning something just buries the pain deeper, while releasing it lets the pain finally move through you and out. Go back to the sand for a moment, because it teaches something simple but easy to forget. When your hand is clenched into a fist, it looks strong. It looks like control. It looks, from the outside, like you are holding on with everything you have. But look at what's actually happening inside that fist. The tighter you squeeze, the more sand pushes out between your fingers, spilling onto the ground, wasted, lost, gone. The very act of gripping harder is what causes the loss you were trying to prevent. Now picture the open hand, palm flat, fingers relaxed, nothing forced. It looks weaker from the outside. It looks like you're not even trying. But the sand rests there peacefully, undisturbed, because there is nothing fighting against it. This is what real release actually looks like in your life. It's not weakness. It's the quiet strength of finally trusting that some things were never meant to be forced to stay, and the ones that were meant to stay will do so far more easily when you stop suffocating them with your grip. This is exactly what the old forest teachers were pointing to when they spoke about non-attachment, and it's often misunderstood by people hearing it for the first time. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean walking through life numb to everything and everyone, refusing to let anything matter so you'll never have to feel loss again. That would be abandonment dressed up as spiritual wisdom, and it's a trap many people fall into when they misread these teachings. True non-attachment is the opposite. It's caring so completely, so honestly, that you refuse to let fear turn your love into a cage. You let the person you love be free, not because you don't care if they leave, but because you understand that holding them too tightly is what actually pushes them away. Apply this to everything you carry. The grudge you refuse to release. Releasing it doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It means you finally stop letting the hurt control your present moment. The dream that didn't happen the way you planned. Releasing it doesn't mean the dream didn't matter. It means you stop forcing your life to match an old picture instead of noticing the life that's actually unfolding in front of you right now. The identity you built around being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never asks for help. Releasing it doesn't mean you stop being strong. It means you finally allow yourself to be human, which was always the stronger, truer thing to be. This is the quiet difference between a person who has abandoned their pain and a person who has truly released it. The one who abandoned it looks fine on the surface, but flinches the moment anything gets close to the old wound, because it was never actually healed, just buried and avoided. The one who released it can talk about the same painful memory with calm in their voice, not because it didn't matter, but because they finally let it move all the way through them instead of trapping it inside. That calm is not indifference. It's what peace actually looks like once the fist finally opens. You can usually tell the difference between the two if you pay attention long enough. The person who has abandoned something tends to talk about it either too much or not at all. They bring it up constantly, still fighting a battle that ended long ago, or they refuse to speak of it entirely, changing the subject the second it comes near. Both are signs of a wound still gripped tightly, just gripped in different directions. The person who has actually released something can hold the memory without needing to relive it or hide from it. They can say, "That happened, it hurt, and here is what I understand now," without their voice shaking, without their body tensing, without needing you to agree with them or comfort them to feel okay. That steadiness is not something you can fake. It only comes from having gone through the actual process of release, rather than skipping straight to the appearance of it. This matters because so much of what passes for healing in the world today is actually just a more polished form of abandonment. People learn the language of letting go without ever doing the deeper work underneath it. They say the right words, "I've moved on, I've forgiven them, I'm over it," while their body tells a different story entirely. tightening at the mention of a name, going quiet at the memory of a place, reacting to a smell, or a song, or a certain kind of weather, with a wave of feeling they can't quite explain. This is not a failure. It simply means the release hasn't finished yet. The words arrived before the feeling did, and that's a common trap, because words are so much easier to control than the body. Real release asks something slower of you. It asks you to actually feel the weight of what you're setting down before you set it down, rather than rushing past the feeling to get to the relief on the other side. This is uncomfortable, and it's exactly why so many people avoid it. It's much easier to numb the pain, distract from it, intellectualize it, than it is to simply sit with it long enough for it to move through you naturally, the way weather moves through the sky, without needing to be forced along. But this discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that the process is actually working, the same way a muscle aches after it's finally being used, the way it was meant to be used, after years of sitting still. Think again about the open hand holding sand. Notice that the hand isn't doing nothing. It requires a kind of quiet effort to keep the hand open, relaxed, unclenched, especially when every instinct in you wants to close it tighter the moment you feel something might slip away. This is the same quiet effort required to truly release instead of abandon. It's not passive. It's not simply forgetting or ignoring or pretending. It's an active, ongoing choice to keep your hand open even when fear tells you to grip harder, to trust that what's meant to stay will stay without needing to be crushed into place, and what's meant to go will go gently without needing to be violently thrown. This is the real work behind every teaching about letting go that you'll ever hear. Not coldness, not indifference, not pretending the past didn't happen or that the pain wasn't real. Just an open hand, held steady, trusting that release and love were never actually opposites to begin with. They were always meant to move together, the same way the river moves and still remains a river, the same way the sand rests peacefully in the palm that finally stopped squeezing. The story of the two monks and the river. There's an old tale of two monks walking together after heavy rain. They come to a river crossing where a woman stands, afraid to cross because the current is too strong. Without a word, the older monk lifts her onto his back, carries her across, and sets her down gently on the other side. The two monks continue walking in silence. Hours later, the younger monk can't hold it in anymore. "We are not supposed to touch women," he says. "How could you carry her like that?" The older monk replies calmly, "I set her down by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story isn't about monks or rules. It's about you. It's about the argument from last week that you're still replaying in your head. The mistake from 10 years ago that you still punish yourself for at 2 a.m. The version of the future you imagined that didn't happen, and you're still grieving it like it was real. You set it down long ago. Some part of you just never told your hands. Sit with the image for a moment. Two men walking the same road, the same distance, the same hours in the sun. One walks light, because the moment his task ended, he released it completely. The other walks heavy, not because anything is physically on his back, but because his mind never got the signal that the crossing was over. This is the part of the story people skip past too quickly. The younger monk wasn't carrying the woman. He was carrying the idea of her, the discomfort of the moment, the question of whether it was right, replaying it long after it had any relevance to what was actually happening on the road in front of him. This happens to you more often than you'd like to admit. Someone says something careless to you in the morning, and by evening, you've replayed it so many times that the sting feels fresh, as if it just happened, when in reality, the moment itself lasted 3 seconds and ended hours ago. The event is over, The other person has likely already forgotten it, but you are still standing at that riverbank in your mind, still carrying something that was only ever meant to be crossed, not kept. Notice how the older monk didn't pretend the moment never happened. He didn't scold himself for helping her. He didn't spend the walk defending his choice or debating whether it was right. He simply did what needed to be done, and when it was done, he set it down. This is the part that looks almost too simple to be real, and yet it's exactly why it works. He didn't need to analyze the moment to death to be at peace with it. He trusted the action in the moment it happened, and once it passed, he let it pass completely, without dragging it through the rest of his day. Compare this to how most of us handle even small decisions. We make a choice, and then we spend hours, sometimes days, replaying whether it was the right one. Did I say the right thing in that meeting? Should I have responded differently to that message? Was I too harsh, not harsh enough, too quiet, too loud? The moment itself is long gone, but the mind keeps walking back to the riverbank, picking the woman back up, carrying her all over again, exhausting itself over a crossing that already happened and cannot be uncrossed. This is what makes the younger monk's question so revealing. He asks, "How could you carry her?" As if the older monk did something wrong by acting simply and completely in the moment. But really, the deeper question hiding underneath his words is, how are you not still carrying this the way I am? He cannot understand freedom because he has never experienced it. He has only ever known the weight of replaying, questioning, defending. The older monk's peace is almost incomprehensible to him, because peace like that requires something the younger monk hasn't learned yet, the ability to fully finish a moment instead of dragging it forward indefinitely. Think about what you are still carrying from years ago that has long since ended in every practical sense. The argument that was resolved, or at least stopped, yet still plays in your head at night. The mistake you made that hurt no one but yourself, yet you still bring it up in your own mind as proof that you can't be trusted. The version of your future you imagined so clearly, the career, the relationship, the timeline, that didn't happen the way you pictured, and some part of you is still standing at that riverbank, still holding on to a future that never crossed over into being real, grieving it as if it were an actual loss, instead of an idea that simply changed shape. Here is the strange comfort inside this story, once you really let it land. You already know how to set things down. It's not a skill you're missing. You've done it before, more times than you realize, in moments too small to notice. You forgot about an argument by the next morning once, somewhere in your life. You moved past a disappointment without carrying it for years, somewhere in your past. The ability was never gone. It simply got buried under the belief that carrying things longer means caring about them more, when in truth, carrying something longer than it needs to be carried usually means something very different. It means part of you hasn't been given permission to stop. That permission is not something anyone else can give you. It's not something that arrives on its own, with enough time passing. Time alone does not set stones down. People carry the same wound for 20, 30, 40 years, proving that time is not the thing that heals. Release is the thing that heals, and release requires a decision, however small and quiet, to finally say, "This crossing is finished. I can put this down now. I have carried it far enough." Picture the older monk walking those last few miles, easy and unburdened, while the younger monk walks beside him, shoulders tight, mind circling the same 3-second moment from hours before. Neither of them is walking a harder road physically. The road is the same road. The weather is the same weather. The only difference between them is what each one is choosing to carry in his mind, while his feet do the same simple work of moving forward. This is the choice available to you as well. Every single day, in every single moment you catch yourself replaying something that already ended. You can keep carrying it, the way the younger monk did, exhausting yourself over a river you already crossed. Or you can do what the older monk did, without ever needing to explain himself. Set it down, right there on the bank, and keep walking, lighter, into whatever comes next. There's another layer to this story worth sitting with, and it has to do with why the younger monk asked the question in the first place. He wasn't only confused about the older monk's peace, he was also, in some quiet way, asking for permission. Notice how he waited hours before he finally spoke. He carried his question the same way he carried his discomfort, turning it over and over, afraid to say it out loud, afraid of what it might mean about him if he asked it. This is often how it works with the things we're most desperate to release. We don't say them right away. We sit with them, turn them over, rehearse how we might bring them up, and by the time we finally do, we've already spent hours or days or years carrying the very question we were too afraid to voice. When the older monk finally answers, he doesn't scold the younger monk for asking. He doesn't make him feel foolish for still carrying the moment. He simply offers the truth, plainly, without judgment. I set her down by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? There's no anger in this response, no impatience, only a kind of gentle surprise, the way you might respond to a friend who's been holding their breath for no reason and doesn't realize they can simply exhale. This is important because so often when we finally admit what we're still carrying, we expect to be judged for it, criticized for taking so long, shamed for not letting go sooner. But the truth is usually far kinder than we expect. The truth is usually just an invitation to breathe. Think about the last time you finally said out loud something you'd been carrying silently for a long time. An old regret, an unspoken hurt, a fear you'd never voiced. Notice how often the response you feared never actually came. Notice how often, once it was finally spoken, the weight of it felt smaller, simply because it was no longer trapped inside you alone. This is part of why the story is so often told, generation after generation, tradition after tradition. It's not really about monks or rules about touching. It's about the simple, almost embarrassing truth that most of us are still carrying things we already had every right to set down, and the only thing standing between us and that relief is the willingness to finally ask the question, and the willingness to finally believe the answer when it comes. Why your body remembers what your mind won't release. Here's something few people talk about. The weight you refuse to release doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives in your shoulders, your jaw, your stomach, your breath. Tension is not random. It is old weight your body is still holding, because your mind hasn't given it permission to put it down. This is why forgiveness feels physical when it finally happens. This is why people describe grief lifting like something literal, a heaviness leaving the chest. The body keeps score of everything you refuse to release, and the body is patient. It will hold that stone for you for decades if you let it, quietly aching, quietly bracing, waiting for the day you finally say, "You can rest now." Think about the last time you were truly angry, or truly afraid, or truly heartbroken. Notice where it lived in your body, not just your mind. Anger often sits in the jaw, tightening it until you catch yourself clenching your teeth without knowing why. Fear often sits in the stomach, turning it hollow and unsettled long after the actual danger has passed. Grief often sits in the chest, pressing down like something physical is resting there, even though nothing is technically there at all. Your mind may have moved on to other thoughts by now, distracted by the next task, the next conversation, the next scroll through your phone. But your body is still holding the shape of that old feeling, because your body never got the message that it's safe to release it. This is the part most people miss when they try to think their way out of pain. They believe that if they can just understand something clearly enough, explain it thoroughly enough, reason through it completely enough, the weight will disappear. But understanding something in your mind and releasing it in your body are two completely different processes, and one does not automatically lead to the other. You can know, intellectually, that the person who hurt you years ago has no power over your life anymore, and still feel your chest tighten every time you hear their name. You can know that the mistake you made wasn't as catastrophic as it felt in the moment, and still feel your stomach drop every time you remember it. The mind can accept something long before the body is ready to let it go, and this gap between knowing and feeling is where so many people get stuck, wondering why they still hurt over something they've already figured out. This is also why certain moments of release feel so surprising when they finally happen. Someone forgives another person after years of resentment, and instead of just feeling like a mental shift, they describe it as something physical, a weight lifting off their chest, their shoulders dropping for the first time in years, a breath going deeper than it has in a long time. This isn't poetic exaggeration, it's an accurate description of what's actually happening. The body has been holding tension in preparation for a wound that already happened, bracing as if it might happen again at any moment. When true release occurs, the body finally receives the signal that the danger has passed, and it responds the only way it knows how, by letting go of the physical grip it's been holding, sometimes for years, without you even noticing. This is why breathing matters so much in every tradition that teaches release. Not because breath is magical on its own, but because breath is one of the few places where the mind and body meet directly. When you're holding on to old pain, your breath tends to become shallow, staying high in the chest, never quite reaching all the way down. This isn't a coincidence. Shallow breathing is the body's way of staying alert, staying braced, staying ready for whatever it's still guarding against. A deep, full breath requires the body to relax completely, and the body will not relax completely around something it hasn't been given permission to release. This is why simply sitting still and breathing deeply, without trying to force any particular thought or feeling, can sometimes bring old emotions to the surface unexpectedly. The breath reaches down into places the mind had sealed off, and what's been stored there finally has room to move. Pay attention to your own body over the next few days. Notice where you carry tension without meaning to. Notice the moments your jaw tightens, your shoulders rise toward your ears, your stomach knots for no obvious reason. Instead of pushing past these signals the way you usually do, pause and ask, what is this tension actually protecting? What old moment is my body still bracing for, even though it already happened, even though it's already over? You may not get a clear answer right away, and that's fine. The question itself is enough to begin loosening the grip, because awareness is always the first step before release can happen. The body cannot let go of something it isn't allowed to acknowledge, and so much of healing simply begins with finally, gently, noticing what has been silently carried for far too long. Consider how differently people move through the world, depending on how much old weight their bodies are still holding. Some people walk into a room and their whole presence feels open, easy, unguarded, even in unfamiliar situations. Others walk into that same room already bracing, shoulders slightly raised, jaw slightly set, ready for something to go wrong before anything has even happened. This isn't about confidence in the way people usually talk about it. It's about how much unfinished tension the body is still holding from moments that happened long before this particular room, this particular day. The nervous system doesn't always know the difference between an old threat and a new situation. It simply responds the way it's been trained to respond, based on everything it's had to protect itself from before. This is why healing is rarely as simple as deciding to feel differently. You cannot think your way out of a body that's still holding old tension, the same way you cannot talk a clenched fist into opening just by explaining to it, logically, that there's nothing left to hold on to. The body needs its own kind of permission, separate from the mind's understanding, and that permission usually comes slowly, through repeated moments of safety, through breath, through stillness, through finally staying present with a feeling, instead of rushing past it the way you always have before. Consider too how much of what looks like a personality trait is actually just an old protective pattern the body has never been given permission to release. The person who needs to check the door is locked 3 times before bed isn't simply cautious by nature. Somewhere in their history, safety was taken from them without warning, and the body decided that vigilance was the price of never being caught off guard again. The person who can't sit still without something in their hands isn't simply restless. Stillness, for their body, may have once meant danger was closer, and movement became the way it learned to stay ready. None of this makes a person broken or overly sensitive. It simply means their body is still running an old program, built for a different time, still trying its best to keep them safe long after the original threat has passed. This is also why people sometimes feel emotional for no clear reason during something as simple as a deep breathing exercise, a long walk, a quiet stretch, or even just lying still with nothing to distract them. It's not that anything went wrong. It's that the stillness finally gave the body enough space to release something it had been holding onto for far too long. Something the mind had already moved past, but the body never got the chance to fully let go of. Tears in these moments aren't a sign of falling apart. They're often the opposite. They're a sign of something finally being allowed to move, after being frozen in place for months or years. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Your body is not working against you when it holds tension. It's trying to protect you, based on everything it's learned so far, even when that protection is no longer needed. It's not broken, it's simply loyal, sometimes to a fault, still guarding old wounds long after the danger has passed. And just like an old friend who's been standing guard for too long, it doesn't need to be forced to stop. It simply needs to be told, gently and clearly, that it's safe now, that the moment has passed, that it's finally allowed to rest. The illusion of control. Most of what we carry because we believe controlling it keeps us safe. If I plan every outcome, nothing will surprise me. If I control how people see me, I won't get hurt. If I hold on tightly enough to the way things used to be, they won't have to change. But control was always an illusion, dressed up as safety. You cannot control the weather, yet you still walk outside every day. You cannot control other people's hearts, yet you still love. You cannot control tomorrow, yet you still wake up and try. Somewhere, without even realizing it, you already trust life more than you give yourself credit for. Letting go isn't learning a new skill. It's simply admitting what was already true. You were never in full control to begin with. You were only ever carrying weight you didn't need to prove a point to no one. Think about how much of your daily energy goes toward trying to control things that were never actually within your control in the first place. You rehearse conversations before they happen, trying to control how the other person will respond, even though you have no way of knowing what they'll actually say. You plan out every detail of a future event, trying to control every possible outcome, even though life has shown you again and again that plans rarely unfold exactly as expected. You manage how you're perceived, choosing your words carefully, adjusting your behavior, trying to control what other people think of you, even though their opinions were never something you could actually reach into their minds and shape. This constant reaching for control is exhausting precisely because it's chasing something that doesn't exist. It's like trying to hold water in your fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it disappears between your fingers, and yet the instinct to squeeze harder remains, because letting the hand relax feels like giving up, when really, it's the only thing that was ever going to work. Here's what's strange about this illusion. If you actually stop and look at your life, you'll notice you're already trusting things you have no control over, all the time, without even realizing it. You walk outside without knowing what the weather will do, and you don't fall apart over it. You simply bring an umbrella if the sky looks uncertain, and you adjust as you go. You love people without any guarantee they'll stay, without any contract ensuring they won't change their mind, or leave, or hurt you, and you do it anyway, because some part of you understands that refusing to love until safety is guaranteed would mean never loving at all. You go to sleep every night trusting, without proof, that you'll wake up tomorrow and have another chance to try again. None of this is something you consciously decided to trust. It's simply built into how you already live, proof that some deep part of you has always known how to release control, even while another part of you insists on gripping it everywhere else. This double standard is worth sitting with a little longer, because once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. You'll drive on a highway surrounded by strangers, trusting hundreds of people you've never met to stay in their own lane, and you don't spend the whole drive gripping the wheel in terror, even though, technically, you have no control over what any of them decide to do. Yet you might spend hours gripped by anxiety over a single conversation you can't control the outcome of, or a decision someone else is making that has nothing to do with you. The inconsistency isn't a flaw in your character. It simply shows you where the old wounds live and where they don't. Wherever trust flows easily, there was no deep injury to guard against. Wherever control tightens like a fist, there's usually an old story underneath it, quietly insisting that this, at least, cannot be allowed to go wrong again. So the real question isn't whether you're capable of trusting life without controlling every outcome. You already do this constantly, more than you give yourself credit for. The real question is why you allow yourself to trust in some areas of life and refuse to trust in others. Why is it easy to walk outside without controlling the weather, but impossible to walk into an uncertain future without controlling every detail of the plan? Why is it possible to love someone without a guarantee, but impossible to release a grudge without a guarantee that releasing it won't hurt you again? The answer usually comes down to where the old wounds are. You trust the weather because the weather has never personally betrayed you. But if you were hurt by uncertainty before, a sudden loss, a broken promise, a plan that fell apart and cost you dearly, that specific kind of uncertainty becomes the one you grip tightest, long after the original wound has healed on the surface. Control becomes a way of trying to prevent history from repeating itself, even though gripping tighter has never actually been what prevented pain in the first place. It only ever added the extra weight of exhaustion on top of whatever was already happening. Letting go of this illusion doesn't mean becoming careless or passive. It doesn't mean you stop making plans or stop caring about outcomes. It means you finally stop confusing effort with control. You can work hard towards something and still release your grip on exactly how or when it arrives. You can love someone fully and still release your need to guarantee they'll never leave. You can walk into tomorrow prepared and still release your need to know exactly what it holds. This is not weakness. This is what it actually looks like to trust life the way you already trust the sunrise, without ever having controlled it and without it ever needing you to. Think about how much lighter certain moments in your life have felt. Moments where you genuinely had no choice but to let go of control, and something in you finally relaxed because there was simply nothing left to grip. Maybe it was a flight delay you couldn't change, and somewhere between the frustration and the waiting, you simply accepted it and the accepting itself brought a strange kind of peace you didn't expect. Maybe it was a diagnosis, a loss, an ending you never would have chosen, and in the middle of it, once the fighting stopped, once you stopped trying to control the uncontrollable, something quieter took over. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of steadiness that only comes when you finally stop wrestling with what already is. This is the strange gift, hidden inside the moments life takes control, away from you completely. It shows you, often against your will, that you can survive without gripping so tightly. It proves, in ways words never could, that release does not equal collapse. And once you've experienced that even once, some part of you starts to wonder why you spend so much energy gripping everything else, when the moments you were forced to release were often the moments you found the most unexpected peace. Of course, this doesn't mean you should wait for life to force your hand before you practice release. You can begin choosing it now, in smaller ways, long before circumstances demand it. You can notice yourself gripping a plan too tightly and consciously loosen your hold, allowing room for it to change. You can notice yourself trying to control how someone perceives you and consciously let that need soften, trusting that you don't need to manage every impression to be worthy of respect. You can notice yourself holding on to the way things used to be and consciously allow the present moment to simply be what it is, rather than constantly measuring it against a past that no longer exists. This practice doesn't happen all at once, and it isn't meant to. Every small moment where you choose trust over control is like setting down one more stone from the bag you've been carrying. You won't notice the difference after just one moment, but over time, stone by stone, choice by choice, you'll find yourself walking differently, not because life became more predictable, but because you finally stopped needing it to be. And that, more than any 5-year plan, or carefully managed image, or tightly gripped version of how things should be, is what real safety actually feels like. Not certainty, not control, just the quiet, steady trust that you can meet whatever comes, open-handed, the same way you've already been meeting the weather, the years, and the mornings, all along. What the universe actually means. When people say, "Let the universe carry the rest," it isn't a magical phrase that removes responsibility from your life. It means something much simpler and much harder. Trust that not everything requires your grip. Trust that some outcomes will unfold, whether you white-knuckle them or not. Trust that your only job was ever to walk the path with open hands, not to drag the mountain behind you and call it discipline. This is not passivity. The river still moves. The seed still grows. The seasons still change. Nothing stops moving when you let go. It simply stops fighting itself. And there is a profound difference between effort and struggle. Effort flows. Struggle grips. You can work hard and still be at peace, if you finally stop confusing exhaustion with meaning. Most people misunderstand this phrase the moment they hear it, and it's worth slowing down to see why. When they hear, "Let the universe carry the rest," they picture someone lying back, doing nothing, waiting for good things to fall into their lap, while the world does all the work. This picture is so far from what the phrase actually means that it almost misses the point entirely. Nothing in nature works this way. The seed does not wait passively for the tree to appear around it. It still has to crack open. It still has to push roots downward into darkness before it can push a single leaf upward into light. The seed does its part completely, fully, without holding back. What it doesn't do is stand guard over the process, gripping the soil, demanding to control the exact moment the first leaf breaks through. It does the work that's actually its to do, and it trusts the rest, the sunlight, the rain, the timing, to unfold the way it's meant to, without needing its permission or supervision every step of the way. This is the real meaning, hiding underneath the phrase. Your grip was never the thing making the outcome happen. You've simply been mistaking your anxiety for effort for so long that the two have started to feel like the same thing. Think about how much of your worry has actually changed an outcome versus how much of it simply made the waiting more painful. The interview result didn't come faster because you replayed every answer 100 times the night before. The decision the other person needed to make wasn't sped up because you checked your phone every few minutes. The healing your body needed didn't accelerate because you spent your energy fearing it wouldn't happen. In almost every case, the outcome arrived on its own timeline, regardless of how tightly you gripped it along the way. The only thing your grip actually changed was how exhausted you were by the time it finally arrived. This is where the phrase becomes less mystical and more practical than people expect. Letting the universe carry the rest simply means doing your honest part, showing up, trying, preparing, caring, and then releasing your need to control the outcome once your part is finished. It's the difference between planting the seed and then digging it up every few days to check if the roots are growing yet. The digging doesn't help the roots grow faster. It only disturbs them, sets them back, forces the seed to spend its limited energy recovering from your impatience instead of using that energy to actually grow. Most people don't dig up seeds, but almost everyone does this exact thing with their dreams, their relationships, their unfinished plans, checking, worrying, controlling, disturbing the very process they're hoping will succeed, simply because waiting without gripping feels unbearable. Notice, too, that nothing about this trust requires you to stop moving. This is the part that gets confused most often, especially by people who hear "let go" and assume it means give up. The river that trusts its own current still moves with tremendous force. It still carves through stone. Over enough time, it still finds its way around every obstacle in its path, not by refusing to move, but by refusing to fight itself over which direction to take. This is effort without struggle, and it's a completely different kind of energy than what most people are used to living with. Struggle happens when you're fighting the current, trying to force water to move somewhere it doesn't naturally want to go, spending most of your strength on resistance instead of movement. Effort happens when you're moving with the current, working hard, yes, sometimes very hard, but never against yourself, never gripping so tightly that the work itself becomes a form of suffering. You can feel the difference between these two states in your own body if you pay attention. Struggle feels tight, clenched, breathless, like you're constantly bracing against something that might collapse if you ease up even slightly. Effort feels full, engaged, sometimes tiring, but never suffocating. You can work an entire day with real effort and still feel, underneath the tiredness, a kind of steadiness. You can work half a day with real struggle and feel completely wrung out, not because the work itself was too much, but because you spent the whole time gripping against an outcome you were terrified you couldn't control. This is what it means to trust that your only job was ever to walk the path with open hands. Open hands can still carry things. They can still work, still build, still reach toward what they want. What open hands cannot do is clench so tightly around the outcome that they forget the actual walking. This is the mountain people drag behind them and mistake for discipline. The belief that suffering over an outcome is what makes you deserving of it, that you haven't tried hard enough unless you've exhausted yourself with worry along the way. But the mountain was never required. It was only ever extra weight, added on top of the real work, convincing you that misery was proof of effort, when really it was only ever proof of fear. Letting the universe carry the rest is simply the recognition that you were never meant to do this alone, gripping every variable, controlling every outcome, forcing every result into existence through sheer exhausted will. Some of it was always going to be carried by something larger than your grip, timing you can't see yet, people you haven't met yet, doors that haven't opened yet. Your part was never to control all of that. Your part was only ever to walk, honestly and fully, and then open your hands enough to let the rest of it move the way it was always going to move, with or without your permission, with or without your fear, standing guard over every step. Think about the things in your life that actually came together well, the moments you look back on and feel genuinely grateful for. If you trace them honestly, you'll often find that the pieces you gripped hardest were rarely the pieces that mattered most. The friendship that changed your life probably wasn't something you engineered through calculated effort. It likely arrived through a conversation you didn't plan, a moment you almost skipped, a connection that formed on its own once you simply showed up and stayed open. The opportunity that shifted everything probably didn't come from the version of the plan you gripped so tightly for months beforehand. It likely came from an unexpected direction entirely, one that only had room to appear once you stopped forcing the original plan to be the only acceptable outcome. This is not to say effort doesn't matter. It matters enormously, but effort and grip are not the same thing, no matter how much they've been taught to you, as if they were interchangeable. You can prepare fully for an opportunity and still release your need to control exactly which door it walks through. You can love someone with your whole heart and still release your need to know exactly how the relationship will unfold. You can work toward a goal with everything you have and still release your grip on the specific timeline you originally imagined. This release doesn't weaken your effort. If anything, it strengthens it, because energy that isn't being spent on gripping the outcome becomes energy available for the actual work in front of you. Consider what it might mean to genuinely live this way, even for a single day. Instead of waking up already bracing for what might go wrong, already gripping the day before it's even begun, you simply meet what arrives, do your honest part with it, and release your hold on how it needs to turn out. This isn't naive optimism, pretending nothing bad will ever happen. It's something sturdier than optimism. It's trust built not on the belief that everything will go exactly as planned, but on the deeper understanding that you have survived every version of uncertain before this one, and you are more capable of meeting whatever comes than your fear has ever given you credit for. This is what people are really pointing to when they speak of letting the universe carry the rest. Not magic, not the absence of effort, just the quiet, mature understanding that you were only ever responsible for your own honest movement through the world. And the rest, the timing, the outcomes, the doors that open, and the ones that quietly close, was always going to unfold with or without your grip, and unfolds far more gracefully the moment you finally stop trying to drag it forward by force. The practice of setting down one stone at a time. You don't release the whole backpack in one moment. That's not how it works, and anyone who tells you it is hasn't actually walked this path. You release it one stone at a time. Today, maybe it's the grudge from years ago. Tomorrow, maybe it's the need for someone's approval. Next week, maybe it's the fear of not being enough. Each time you consciously choose to set one thing down, your shoulders lift a little. Your breath gets a little deeper. You start to remember what it felt like before you started collecting weight that was never yours in the first place. This is not a one-time decision. It's a quiet, daily practice of asking yourself, is this mine to carry, or have I just been carrying it out of habit? There's a reason so many people give up on letting go before they even really begin, and it's because they expect it to happen all at once, in one dramatic moment of clarity. They imagine waking up one morning completely free of the grudge, the fear, the old identity, as if healing works like flipping a switch. When that switch doesn't flip, when the weight is still there the next morning, and the morning after that, they assume the process isn't working, and they quietly give up, going back to carrying everything the way they always have, convinced that release was never really possible for someone like them. But this expectation was always the wrong one. Nothing that took years to build gets dismantled in a single afternoon. Every stone in your bag was picked up slowly, one decision at a time, one hurt at a time, one moment of fear at a time, across months and years you may not even fully remember. It would be strange then to expect the entire bag to empty itself the moment you decide you're ready to be free. Release works the same way accumulation worked. Slowly, quietly, one choice at a time, so gradual that you might not even notice the difference until you look back and realize how much lighter you've become compared to where you started. Start with something small, because small is where real change actually begins, even though it rarely feels significant enough in the moment. Pick one thing, just one. Maybe it's the resentment you've been carrying towards someone who hurt you years ago, someone who likely doesn't even think about what happened anymore. You don't have to forgive them completely in one sitting. You don't have to pretend it didn't matter. You simply have to ask yourself, honestly, is carrying this resentment today actually protecting me from anything, or is it just draining me for no purpose? Sit with that question. Let the honest answer surface, even if it's uncomfortable, and then, gently, without forcing a dramatic release, simply allow yourself to consider what it might feel like to set that one stone down, just for today, just as an experiment, without any pressure to make it permanent. This is how the practice actually works. Not through willpower, not through gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to feel differently, but through small, repeated moments of honest noticing. You notice the tension in your shoulders and ask what it's protecting. You notice the old argument replaying in your mind and ask if it's still serving any purpose. You notice yourself performing for someone's approval and ask whether that approval is actually necessary for your peace, or whether you've simply been chasing it out of habit for so long you forgot you ever had a choice. Some days you'll set a stone down and it will stay down, gone for good, never picked back up again. Other days you'll set a stone down only to find yourself gripping it again by evening, and that's not failure. That's simply how the practice works for almost everyone who's ever walked this path honestly. Old habits don't dissolve the first time you notice them. They loosen gradually, with repetition, the same way a habit was built in the first place, through repeated small moments rather than one grand gesture. This is worth repeating, because so many people quietly abandon the practice the moment they catch themselves picking a stone back up. They mistake this as proof that the release never really worked, that they're somehow incapable of the kind of peace other people seem to have found. But picking a stone back up once, twice, even many times, doesn't erase the moments you managed to set it down. Each time you notice it again and choose, once more, to release it, you're not starting over from nothing. You're simply practicing the same muscle again, the way anyone practices anything they're still learning. Imperfectly, inconsistently, but with the muscle growing stronger, regardless of how many times it stumbles along the way. What matters most is not perfection in this practice, but consistency. Not asking the question once and expecting permanent transformation, but asking it again and again, quietly, patiently. Every time you feel that familiar heaviness settle into your chest, or your shoulders, or your breath. Over time, this simple, humble question, is this mine to carry, or have I just been carrying it out of habit, becomes less of an exercise and more of a natural instinct, something your mind starts doing on its own, almost without effort, the same way breathing became automatic long after you first learned how. And slowly, stone by stone, day by day, you'll notice the difference, not in one dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of 1,000 small ones. You'll notice you can hear an old trigger and feel nothing where you used to feel a flinch. You'll notice you can think of an old failure without the same wave of shame washing over you. You'll notice your shoulders sitting a little lower, your breath reaching a little deeper, your steps feeling a little lighter, not because life became easier, but because you finally stopped carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place, one honest, quiet, deliberate choice at a time. It helps to have a simple way of checking in with yourself, something you can return to without needing an elaborate ritual or a perfect moment of stillness. At the end of each day, or even in the middle of a difficult one, you can quietly ask, what am I carrying right now that I could set down tonight? Not everything, just one thing. Maybe it's replaying something someone said to you that wasn't even meant unkindly. Maybe it's the tension of trying to be perfect in front of people who never asked you to be. Maybe it's the old comparison between where you are and where you thought you'd be by now. Whatever surfaces first, that's usually the stone closest to the top of the bag, the one most ready to be released, if you simply give yourself permission. You don't need to fix the stone, understand the stone completely, or even talk about the stone with anyone else. You simply need to notice it, acknowledge that you've been carrying it, and ask yourself honestly whether it's still doing you any good. Most of the time, the honest answer is no. Most of the time, the weight was serving fear more than it was ever serving you. And once you see that clearly, even for a moment, the grip naturally begins to loosen, not because you forced it to, but because you finally saw it for what it actually was. This daily practice will not feel dramatic. It won't feel like the breakthrough moments people describe in stories, the sudden collapse of years of pain in one cathartic instant. Real release is quieter than that, and far more sustainable. It looks like small, ordinary moments repeated with patience, noticing, questioning, releasing, and then doing it again the next day and the day after that, for as long as it takes. There is no finish line where you become a person who never carries anything again. Life will keep handing you new stones, new hurts, new fears to consider picking up. The practice isn't about becoming immune to all of it. It's about becoming someone who no longer forgets they have the choice, someone who catches the weight earlier, questions it sooner, and sets it down before it has the chance to become part of the permanent shape of who they are. This is what it means to walk lighter, not because the road became easier, but because you finally remembered your hands were always free to open, one stone, one breath, one honest question at a time. Here is the moment this entire teaching has been building toward, and it's simple enough to miss if you're not paying attention. You were never asked to carry the outcome. You were only ever asked to walk. The moment you truly understand this, something inside you goes still, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally stopped fighting the current of your own life. Letting go was never about losing what mattered. It was about discovering that your hands were tired from holding something that was already free the entire time. The stone was never chained to you. You just never opened your fingers long enough to notice it could fall. Coming back to where we started, remember the thing you're gripping right now, the one we talked about at the very beginning. Look at it again. Ask yourself honestly, is holding this tighter actually keeping you safe, or has it just become the shape of your fear? The river doesn't grip the water. The open hand holds the sand better than the closed fist ever could. And somewhere behind you, on some riverbank you've already crossed, there is a version of you still carrying weight you set down a long time ago without realizing it. Let it rest there. You already crossed the river. It's time your hands remembered that too. If this brought you even a moment of peace, subscribe. There's more of this waiting for you.